Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and today we're talking about connecting with supporters of your pregnancy help organization. And we've talked recently on the podcast about how to plan for banquets and how to be prepared for those big events. Be prepared for anything so that you're ensuring a smooth and successful event. But what happens afterwards? How do you follow up with those supporters who attended the event in order to create lasting relationships? Well, our Director of Affiliate Services here at Heartbeat International, Kathy German, along with Haley Limo from Least of These Philanthropy, are here to talk about just that. Haley also writes for our Advancement Trends in the Life Community newsletter and provides fundraising consultations through our concierge consultation services. And you can find out more about that in our show notes. Haley and Kathy, it's so good to have both of you here today, and I can't wait to hear more of your ideas on connecting with supporters after an event.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, it's always great to be here. And I love the opportunity to get to talk to our outside consultants, because you guys are actually, you're interacting with our affiliates sometimes on a deeper level because you're really looking at internal processes and strategies and, how they function day to day and that kind of thing. And so you get to go deeper with them about, their fundraising and how that's working and how they can make it better. So I'm glad that we're here today. And so, Haley, can you just start us off by giving a little bit of background maybe on, your fundraising background and then also how you work with our Heartbeat affiliates?
Yes, for sure. So excited to be with you guys today. So I have been doing major gift fundraising for over 10 years now. I kind of started at a very large organization in the Washington, D.C. area, was on a very large team, and really kind of was trial by fire and I learned the art of major gifts. I had a portfolio of donors from coast to coast and was on a fabulous team and just learned a lot during my time there. And so just fell in love with fundraising. It's always funny if you ask anyone in fundraising how they got into it. Well, I'll say we all just fell into it. You don't go to college expecting to be a fundraiser or even sometimes set out as a graduate to be in the fundraising field. We all just kind of find ourselves in it. And so fell in love with it. And after my time there at the larger organization, I became the executive director of a pregnancy center right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. And they were a Heartbeat affiliate. And so there kind of started my connection with Heartbeat and fell in love with you guys and everything you do. And so since then, I have started my own consulting business, Least of These Philanthropy, where I kind of take the things that I've learned over the years and just helped all of smaller nonprofits across the country, most of them pregnancy help centers that are connected with Heartbeat. So a lot of you guys being able to help them just raise more money and kind of learn the art of major gifts. And so when I was at that pregnancy center, we were able to double or triple our fundraising actually in about 18 months time. And that was just absolutely fantastic. And since then, been able to see similar success with lots of other groups across the country, just employing these major gift tactics that I find a lot of pregnancy centers aren't utilizing, don't know how to get started. And so I kind of work with Heartbeat in different ways. I'm always at the conferences, and I will be again this year. So please come see me at my sessions. And I always write for the ATLC, as Kathy said. I teach an class as well, finding and fostering major gifts. And then I also am on the concierge team as well. And so that just means that Kathy and the team is able to connect some of you guys with me for some just deeper training and learning.
That's great. I love that. And yeah, the major gifts course, we always hear such great feedback on that, how helpful it was. So we're happy to have you do that. So let's jump into what happens after the banquet. So why is the post-event follow-up step just as important as the event itself?
Yes, I think this is something that is so important that I feel like a lot of people kind of glaze over or gloss over. There's so much work going into events, and I know you guys said that you just did a podcast on events, and we've also been doing lots of articles on banquets and different events in the ATLC. So I'd advise you guys go back and read some of those articles. But I always say after a banquet or after a gala, a lot of us have post-traumatic event disorder to where we're just exhausted, and it can just be really hard to kind of still have in that mindset of wanting to do that follow-up, and it is just so important because most importantly, because you've spent all this money, right? putting on these events, right? And so it's really important to kind of get out everything you can out of the resources that you've put into that event. And a lot of gifts we're seeing don't just come the night of, they will come afterwards as well. Or a lot of people may not give the night of, but they've heard about you. If they're newer to the organization, they had a great experience with you, but they need that follow up. They need those personal touch points for them to kind of follow through on giving those gifts or being involved long term in your organization. So I kind of feel like the banquet is just like the halftime, for like, I don't really watch sports, but right. It's like, okay, you have the halftime, right? Like after the event is done, but there's so much work that needs to be done afterwards to be able to kind of finish the game through.
I think that's so true. What you just said is after the banquet, you're exhausted because it did take so much work and time and effort. And then you're on that whole night, going through all the, the steps of the banquet and greeting guests and donors and all of that. And then afterwards, you kind of just want to crash and just be like, oh, phew, we're done. But you're not. That's kind of when the work begins. So I love that perspective. So then what should be done in the first 24 to 48 hours? And then what would a more like a long-term plan after that look like as follow-up for your banquet?
Yes. So obviously, handwritten thank you notes, I always say, are king. Those are going to be the most important thing we can do. I understand that if you have 800 or so people coming to your gala, as some of our pregnancy centers do, it may not be completely reasonable to get a handwritten thank you note out in 24 to 48 hours. I get that. But trying to do as many handwritten thank you notes for for as many people as you can. And I think this is a really great time to bring in those board members. I think it's really important that our board is really involved in our fundraising. And I think I've seen a lot of pregnancy centers who aren't like quite sure where to plug them in. Handwritten thank you notes for people who attend your gala, not just give, but who attend as well, is a great way to start. Volunteers as well. So I would definitely say, of course, sending out post emails as well. You want to thank everyone by email, let them know that you appreciated it. Especially if you had a goal that you were trying to meet that night, people walk away from that being like, well, did we meet the goal? Did my donation do anything? So I think it's really important to kind of give people those financial updates, but in that 24 hours post event. And to also kind of make sure that they also have information of where they can continue to donate. Is that through the link that they had last night? Is that through a QR code? Is that on your website? Just continuing to push out that information of where they can give post event. I think something we have to think about when it comes to events, and this is why I love major gifts. Not saying events aren't important, they have their place, but I think we need to look at them with kind of a different lens. So when we're looking at major gifts, it's all about, I used to have a mentor that would say, like, the best gift is the largest gift you can get in the shortest amount of time to the greatest joy of the donor. And so it's really important when we're talking about building those major gift relationships, like the donor kind of determines when they're able to make that large gift, right? And if you're able to kind of be on the donor's timeline, you're going to get the largest gift. You're going to get a larger gift than if you try to put the giving on your own timeline, let's just say. Because when we think about it, when you pick out a date for your gala, you're not necessarily thinking about what works for all your donors. You're thinking about what works for you. But like, let's say you have your gala in the spring, but some of your donors don't get their end of year checks where they normally give their gifts out of till the third or fourth quarter, right? And so I think a lot of times pregnancy centers are going into these events thinking that, oh, everyone has to give. And if we didn't meet our goal that night, then, it wasn't successful. But I think it's really important to remember that just because that date in April worked for you, it probably didn't work for a lot of other people, right? Or maybe they wanted to give a gift that night, but they couldn't because they might be able to have more flexible income at a different part of the year. And so as a side note, I just think it's really important to kind of remember that when it comes to our donors and be able to let them know that they can give a gift for the goal at a different time in the year to be able to meet that, if that makes sense.
It does. That's a great point. And I love the point about, also, doing the handwritten notes, but also the email, because you're right. People do always ask, well, did we meet the goal? Did you surpass it? And so they want to know, and they want to know that their presence and that their gift, were impactful as part of the events. And you're right. The handwritten notes mean a lot to people, and it is hard to get those out. So I like the idea of just drawing in board members and volunteers to help with that. Cause I know we always had, people that would want to volunteer and didn't feel like, well, I don't think I could be a client advocate. Do you have any office type things I can do? And, maybe there wasn't anything at the time, but that's a really great way to help, because people, people do appreciate those handwritten personal notes. And then I find that a lot of volunteers also, they get joy out of writing them. So it's a great way to involve them and just to get more people involved in your center. So I think that's a great call out. Now, we already talked about how planning the banquet can be overwhelming to the executive director and to the staff itself. So how can the team create meaningful ways to follow up with supporters without feeling that burnout?
I think when we think about our follow up, we need to think about segmenting our donors. And I think it's really important that we do that. And I've started doing that with a lot of my clients. And so splitting out the list of figuring out who actually came, because we have a list of people that have RSVP, but who actually came that night, because I think segmenting our list is going to be important. We don't want to send a thank you for coming email or note to someone who didn't actually make it. And then that makes us look bad. Right. And so that's why data is so important. Right. And so making sure this kind of goes back to your previous question, whoever is doing our events, we have really good people on the data side to be able to track everything correctly. But post op, I think it's really important to segment those lists. So who actually came is going to be really important. Who didn't come? So who can we send an email or a letter that says we missed you, but if you still want to participate, here's this link to help us meet our goal. I think it's really important to send out a letter to people saying thank you so much for coming. I think it's important to also follow up with people that did give. Say thank you so much for giving. Because of you, we were able to meet XYZ of our XYZ goal. And then I do think it's really important for us to follow up with people who came but didn't give yet and say thanks for coming. We noticed that you weren't able to make a gift that night, and just be honest with them. If you would like to help us meet our goal, we are still X number of dollars away, and this is how you can participate in that. And so I think segmenting the list is going to be really important in that 24 to 48 hours, and then putting different people in charge of following up with those different types of lists, I think, is also important. And I also think when we're talking about burnout after events, a lot of people are thinking about the timeline for the day, but their timeline only goes through the day of the event, right? And so many people forget to have people scheduled for cleanup or different things like that. But if you can also save some of your volunteers for post-op support, like maybe you have a set of volunteers that comes in the morning after to help segment those lists for you, or a group of volunteers that starts on handwritten thank you notes. I even think it's really important the night of the event to be able to bring thank you notes, because all your volunteers are going to be there. Give them the thank you notes before the event starts, so that way they can go home that night and they already have their thank you notes, and then you can email a list afterwards. So I just think different prep is key to kind of really think about that follow-up, because again, that follow-up is going to be key. And I think segmentation helps, because we want to make sure we're getting the right message to the right group of people, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think, what you said about preparation, I think is really key right there too, because you're right. We're so caught up in thinking about the banquet itself and making sure the caterer and the food and all of that is set, and the speaker and decorations and the setup and cleanup and everything, but we don't necessarily plan for the follow-up. And so that needs to be part of the whole banquet strategy, right? Like we need to have a plan and a timeline that, like you just said too, doesn't end with, okay, 8 o'clock, it's over, we're done for another year. No, you're not. You still have that whole follow-up. So what are some of the pitfalls that you see with organizations that depend on a main event such as a banquet for much of their fundraising? So their only focus is the banquet, and they hope and pray that that's going to bring in the majority of the money that they need. So what do you see with that?
Yes, definitely. I think when we're talking about raising money, we want to raise the most money possible, right? Which means if we want to raise the most money possible, we want people to give the largest gifts possible, right? And so when we kind of think about it like that, I always tell my clients to think about fundraising in an 80-20 rule. We want to try to get 80% of our funds from 20% of our people. I think a lot of people go off of 100-100 type of, we want to get 100% of our funds from everybody. So, I often see these emails, if everyone gives $5, then we'll meet our goal this month. Well, no, not everyone's going to give $5, right? And so it would be a lot easier, at least in my mind, and this is why I like major gifts. I would rather go to one person and ask for $10,000 than go to 10 people and ask for $1,000. So that's, I think, kind of the mindset shift that we have to have with people. I think where people have that kind of stop and think on major gifts is they're like, oh, well, that means I need to go actually ask one person for $10,000. And for some people, I guess that seems harder than maybe asking 10 people for 1,000. But I think if you can kind of get over that mindset of we're trying to get larger gifts from people, which will in turn give us back some of our time, I think is really important. So when we look at events kind of in that mindset, people are not going to give the largest gifts possible at an event. Yes, I hear so many people come back at me and said, but Haley, we have someone every year who gives $50,000 and we raise X number of dollars at our event. And like, awesome, great for you. Number one, that doesn't happen with a lot of people. Number two, I guarantee you could raise twice or three times as much more if you actually built relationships with those people outside of those events and asked for more money. If someone's giving you $50,000 at an event, they can give you 100 or 150 or $200,000 if you actually build a relationship with an ask. And so I think events is just leaving so much money on the table. And then again, I think when we're talking about raising the most money possible, that's being donor focused. But events is so organization focused. It's all about the organization. We pick a day that works for us. We pick a venue that works for us. We pick the food that we want. We're not thinking about the donor really in any sense, right? I mean, and just with how busy people's schedules are, like so many of my clients, even just in the past few years, their gala numbers are just completely tanking because we're all scheduled out. We all have a million things going on, you know, and especially with our larger donors, I'm finding out, and this has always been the case. Your major donors aren't going to really necessarily going to want to come and sit through 2 or 3 hours of a banquet and eat some rubber chicken. You know, I mean, I just think like our largest, most wealthy people aren't, that's not how they're spending their Friday night. And, you know, people aren't giving millions of dollars to organizations because they went to an event and they felt good. Like when we look at organizations that are raising the most money, universities, you know, like operas, big nonprofits like that, you know, they're raising the types of money where they're putting people's names like on the front of the building. Like they didn't just go to a gala and have warm fuzzies and then give a gift of that size, right? And they build a relationship with those donors. And so hopefully that answers your question a little bit, but I think we just have to realize that events is very organization centered. It's all about us. And if we want to raise the most money possible, we have to be donor centered. We have to go to the donor on their timeline. More and more, I'm finding out like the best question I can ask a donor in a major gift relationship is, how do you make your giving decisions? And that question really helps me to decide when and how much and what for to ask for. So if, you know, I have so many people say, well, you know, me and my husband sit down in January and get an Excel spreadsheet out. I've had a donor tell me this exact thing. And we decide exactly out in January how much we're going to give. Then that tells me that I need to get to her before January if I want that number on the Excel spreadsheet to be even bigger than the year before. Right. And so we kind of have to get to know those donors, to get to know them and their funds, to understand what we should be asking for and what works for them. And so I just think that's really important for us to be doing, especially in this day and age. There's so many events, there's so many people asking for money, but there's not a lot of people asking for relationships. And so if we can be the organizations, the pregnancy centers that are doing that, that's going to set us apart. And people, I think in our day and age of a digital world, crave those relationships. And so I just think that is the best possible way for us to be moving forward and raising support.
Yeah, that's really, really good. The whole relationship aspect of it. And in your question that you ask about, how do you make your decision about giving? Or, and I've heard it also asked, what is your why? Like, asking your major donors, why do you give to our organization? Like what got you to start? What makes you continue? Like what is it that's driving you to, to give to us? So I think that's really good. And you kind of already basically started talking about this, and, we talked about it in advancement trends that, we love banquets and we love big events. But you also talk about how, we need to find alternative ways to fundraise. So, I mean, and you've kind of already started to go into that with the major donors, but do you have anything else you wanted to add to that about, instead of a banquet, what are things you could try? And one year you just decide, we're not going to have a banquet this year. How would you ease into that?
Yeah, I think most people are giving to the banquets because they want to support the organization. And so if you suddenly didn't have a banquet one year and you had people that have been continually supporting you through the banquet, I would just go to all of them personally and ask them to give that same gift or more, right? Say, hey, it's not serving our organization to be able to do this event. It's costing us X amount of dollars, and we want to put those dollars actually towards the moms and saving babies. Are you okay with that? I doubt any of them would be like, oh, dang, I'm really going to miss that chicken dinner this year and those 3 hours, not to say that all y'all events aren't lovely. I've been to many of them. They're lovely. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But again, it's very organization focused. And I think the more we can be donor focused, the better. Right. And so I think it's important for us to, if you did that, if you said, this year we're not going to do this, and you have X number of people who always give X number of dollars, I would just go to them personally and ask them to still continue their support and just say, we're trying something different because we want more of our support to actually goes towards our mission. Because the fact of the matter it is, a lot of the money that's being given for the banquet is being given for the banquet, sponsorships and different things like that. If someone's giving $50,000 to sponsor a banquet, that money's not necessarily going to support moms. It's going to feed people in the room that night, right? But I would imagine that donor would be completely okay with that $50,000 going directly to the moms and saving babies, right? And so I think we just have to think about it like that. Like, why are people giving to us? And I think that's really important. I've even heard of one organization that did a non-gala gala where everyone bought a ticket and then they just sat at home. So it was like, sponsor a table, but you don't have to come. And people loved it because I just think more and more people don't want to be going to these events, right? I mean, I know for me and my husband, I would rather just like go out to dinner with my husband because like time with my family is so precious rather than going out to a gala or something, but I'll still give that gift anyway. Right. And so I think we just have to think about it in that mindset. Another thing I think is really important to think about galas, especially when we're talking about table sponsorships. And I'm a little like, if you're going to do a gala, I would not do table sponsorships in one sense. But so many people are coming and bringing their friends, but those people aren't giving. Like more and more again, I'm asking people, okay, so how many people are actually coming and how many people are actually giving? And it's such a small number of people that are actually giving the night of. So many people, especially if they buy a table for $1,000, which barely covers the meals of like, let's say 8 people at that table. So many of those people are just bringing whomever and whoever they can to fill those 8 seats, right? And they're not necessarily thinking about what 8 friends can I bring that actually have capacity to give? Because again, who has 8 friends are all free on the same night. So then you just end up with empty seats, or you end up with people that are coming that actually don't have capacity to give. And so I just think galas have become such a hamster wheel of it's not working, right? And so I think we definitely need to mix it up a little bit. I think if you don't want to do a gala or you want to try something different, trying something a lot smaller would be great. It doesn't have to be 800 people. It doesn't even have to be 200 people. It could be 50 people, right? Like actually inviting the people that give that are actual friends of your organization and kind of doing something smaller. It could be as simple as like a donor stewardship night where you have a lot of your top donors come, if you can get them all in this to come at the same time, and have more of a thank you type of event or something like that, something smaller. People love like coffee type events, coffee and desserts, or cocktail, wine and cheese nights, or just something different. I think there's a lot that we can do that still can kind of cover the place of a gala, but just kind of tweaking it up a little bit to save everyone so much money.
Yeah, those are all really good points, Haley. Also, I think you touched on, people would rather go out to dinner with their husband or spend time with family than go to just another event because, let's face it, a lot of, younger people they're busy with kids activities 3 or 4 nights a week. And so they don't need one more thing to add to their schedules. So I think that's a really valid point. But then what would you say, I guess, maybe the argument that, because I know that at our center that I worked at, we like to be able to highlight some of the work that has happened in the ministry and how God has really worked through our volunteers and our staff with different clients. So, you always want to highlight a client story or share, different testimonies and things like that. So how would you come back from that argument about, we have to get this message out. We have to share these testimonies. And if there's people in the room that, just came to fill a seat, maybe if they hear these stories, they're going to be so inspired to give anyways.
Yeah, I would say that I just hardly, on that, maybe if someone came to just fill a seat, they're going to be inspired to give anyways. I've hardly ever seen that happen. So I would just argue that because I've just gone through so many just even in this past year of my clients, like, let's look at who actually gave. Okay, we've been inviting this person for 3 years and they've not given for 3 years. So they're just coming for the free meal, or they're just paying the $100 for their ticket and not giving out of that because they think their $100 for their ticket was their donation and it barely covered their meal. And I think there's so many ways that we can have our donors become like proclaimers of our message, but it doesn't have to be at that top dollar that we're doing it at right now. And I also think there are so many ways to get our message out. And that's why I always talk about especially with our big donors, we should have monthly touch points with our donors. Like I teach my clients, like if you have so many major donors in your database on your list, you should be contacting them every month with just like an update or something like that. You should be meeting with your major donors twice a year, making an ask of them once a year. So, with a lot of those donors that you build relationship with, you're hopefully, and pretty good communication with them, sharing those stories, right? Sharing those touch points, sharing those quotes, sharing those videos. And then, I mean, even in this day and age, everything is so digital. Um, I would think it would almost be worth it, instead of spending money on a big gala, spend money on an amazing production team to come in and film many women and do an amazing video and be able to email that out, or be able to have that to be able to share on your phone with different people. And churches can use that. You would even say you'd be able to get that message out so much more from a video, posting it online, sharing it, than just having someone live in a room. Of course, I do think that I do think we don't need to stop events altogether. I just think maybe we need to look at them a little differently. So I think donor stewardship events are really, really important. Even if all of our top donors can't come, it's still important that we give them the opportunity to meet with them in person, to be able to have someone come and share their story and share their testimony. But usually when we're talking about a donor stewardship event, we're talking about a more segmented list of people we know that are going to give or can give, and people that are actually interested in what we're doing, and we're spending just a lot less on that. I think, I did some research, and I don't remember all the exact numbers, but it's in some of my previous articles, but talking about how generally when we're looking at events, we're looking at a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you spend $50,000, you might raise 100. That's not like a super great ROI. But when you look at major gifts and building relationships, it's at least a 10, sometimes 200-to-1 ratio, right? Like I might go out to lunch with the donor, and a typical gift is $10,000 from building a relationship, meeting with someone for lunch, but that lunch might have cost $20. So $20 in, $10,000 out is a lot better than 50,000 in, $100,000 out. And so, I just think people need to be looking at their galas and their events with a lot more of an analytical mindset. I think people are very emotional about their events. It's something we've done for 30 years, but our board loves it. We love to get dressed up, different things like that. There's so many other things we could do and get dressed up. Doesn't have to be at the expense of our PRCs, right? And so I think sometimes the emotion needs to be kind of pulled out from it a little bit.
Right, that's true. And then you hear too, like, well, this is what we've always done, and we have older donors that come every single year and they're expecting it, but we have, we need to also be bringing in newer, younger donors. So, and that audience is, the ones that probably are not likely to go to an event. During COVID, a lot of us had to cancel our events or shift gears or change the date or whatever, and a lot of them started doing digital type banquets, or events where they presented everything online. Maybe the executive director gave a message and they might have had a client testimony. It might have been a shorter time frame, but do you think that those can be effective? I mean, they're going to cost a little bit less, I would suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely an option. I still think there's a way to, like, if your goal is to raise a certain amount of money that you always raise every year, I think there's other ways to do it than a gala or an online event. I just know me and my husband both work from home and we're on Zoom all day long. So the last thing I would want to do at night is jump on a Zoom call or jump on a link, right? Um, so in that mindset, I don't know how many people would actually tune in. And I do know a lot of people who did that and it wasn't successful. Not a lot of people jumped on because we were all so zoomed out. And so I think there's so many different ways to do that. I still think if you have your gala or something in October and you raise $100,000, like my advice to them, if you decide you're not going to do a gala, go out and get a $50,000 match and run it through the whole month of October. Like that's going to cost nothing for you to do. That's just going to cost, your time to do that is to obviously find that donation and to be able to kind of get the word out about it online. So I think there's a lot of different ways we can fill the gap for that gala support if that's what the PRC is looking for. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And you mentioned earlier about return on investment. And I think that is something that centers really need to look closely at, because it's not just the cost of the speaker and the cost of the venue and the cost of the food and those kinds of things. They've really got to look at, like, how much time is your staff investing in it? Your executive director, development director, your other staff members, even your volunteers, like how much time and energy is put into that. So I think that those are just really, really important things to consider. And it's okay. I think we have to be okay with changing things up and not doing the same things every year. We need to think outside of the box. So I love that you give that perspective. Was there anything else that you wanted to say or share with our listeners about, banquets and major gifts, or anything else with fundraising that you think might be helpful? I mean, I know that you could probably talk for, 6 weeks straight.
So much. Yeah, I think that's really something key that you had just said about staff time. I had just done, it's very hard to determine exactly how much a development director actually is spending on events. But I would say probably if you took all their time that they're spending on a big gala, at least 3 months of their 12 months out of the year is being spent on that. And let's say you have a development director with an average of a $60,000 salary, just average. That means you need to add an extra $15,000 of soft costs to that banquet event. So if someone's saying, well, our banquet only costs $20,000, well, let's add all of your salary and how much actual time you're spending on it. So I think people aren't calculating that at all. They're not really looking at it like that. And I think it's really important. I mean, I just know the economy's not doing as well. Obviously, costs and everything is going up. And so I just think it's really time for us, especially 2026, everyone's doing their budgets, to just really look at the bottom line and the numbers of how we can be more effective next year. And so for me, that's slashing those big gala costs, but that's just my opinion.
Right. But also just, like you've been saying throughout, is like, you're there for your mission and you're there to support your clients. You're not there to feed your donors a fancy dinner. And so I do love that mindset too, is who are we doing this for and why, and is it effective? So those are all really great points. So what does a concierge consultation look like with you? So like if we have someone that calls and is just saying, help, I need help with fundraising and major gifts. Well, what does that look like if they sign up to have consultation services with you?
Yes. Well, obviously, would love to help anyone. So I'm sure you guys will have my contact information there for anyone to reach out. But I kind of walk alongside people for as little or as much as they need. So obviously, I have just kind of training hours where they can book by the hour if possible to kind of come in and work with them on whatever they think they need to work with them on. Of course, my specialty is major gifts. And so that's going to be what I really highlight people for. Most of my clients who I do concierge with, I kind of become like an invisible member-ish of their development team. So I'll kind of come in and kind of look through everything. Like I always start, even if I'm coming in to help them with major gifts, I'm going to start looking at your budget. I'm going to look at your ROI. How much is like overhead do you have? How much are you actually spending on your programs? Are those good numbers? Do you need to adjust those? And then looking at those data processes, like, okay, so if a check comes in, how long does it take before you deposit that check? How long does it take before you actually thank them? What does that thank you look like? And so helping them actually have really good practices in place before we kind of move on to the major gift step. And then we kind of move on to finding, putting together a fundraising plan and finding those major donors in their database and help walking people through A to Z, how to build that relationship, make that ask. And I help them write proposals. And so I kind of say, I almost do everything possible that I can do virtually for you and your development department. I can't go meet with a donor and ask them face to face, but I can help you so much behind the scenes. And it's been really helpful for a lot of people. And so, but it is really important to kind of start when I come in to be able to kind of looking behind everything, even looking at how people are categorizing donations in their database, which you may not think is important. But if I ask, it happens so many times, I'll ask a client, like, how much money did you raise last year from X number? And they can't pull the right numbers from me because whoever input the donation doesn't have a set process and they can't pull the right numbers and any, different things like that. It's really important to kind of have a solid foundation of your development shop before we kind of build the major gift side. So hopefully that kind of answers, but the short answer is I can help anyone for as much or as little as they need, focusing on the major gifts.
No, that does help a lot, and that explains it. So you do everything virtually, right? You're not actually in the center.
Yes, I, of course, if someone wants to bring me in for a short amount of time and do like weekend trainings or different things like that, obviously we can do that. I am in Texas. So if you are in Texas, we can definitely meet in person. But yes, I have young children. And so the season of life I'm in right now is being able to help people digitally. But I will say so many people have seen such great success, wonderful just returns on the investment of kind of focusing on development. And even if you don't hire me, there's many other wonderful concierge development persons with Heartbeat. I just think it's really important that people actually spend the time and money on learning how to do good development, because what we feed grows. And I have seen that happen time and time again, just by focusing on it, just by spending time on it. People are just going to see huge ROIs on that return. I think so many times in PRCs, I see a lot of focus, of course, being put on different aspects of the medical training or your client advocate training or things like that. But I feel like the development piece is like the last part that people are willing to spend money on. But if we don't have that piece set in, you can't do anything else. So just encourage people to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, you have to spend money to make money, right? You've got to be willing to invest in your organization and in that training for your team so that they are doing it effectively. And I love, these days you can do pretty much everything virtually. So I think it's great that you go in and you do a deep dive into their systems and how are they set up and how are they doing it, because they need to have that structure in place working effectively before they can really learn the bigger pieces. So I think that that's really key. And I also love that, you can do this for as little or as long as they need. If, they only want a couple months of time with you or whatever, you can do that. And I've also seen you do, 6 months or longer.
Years. I have some people I've been with them for years, and
Yeah.
it's worked out well for them, and it's been incredible to see them grow. So yeah.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And Haley, thank you so much for this today. This was very helpful and very beneficial. I feel like you shared a lot that's going to be very helpful to our listeners. So thank you again. And Christine, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Haley. I love how you think outside the box, and you've given us some other things as we wrap up this year and we look into the next year. Maybe somebody will be thinking as they're listening, maybe we'll try something different next year. Maybe we'll see what happens. And if our listeners would like to reach you, I will have information in the show notes on all the opportunities we've discussed, including our upcoming annual conference. So that's happening at the end of March in Cincinnati, Ohio. We also have virtual options for that too. And that's a great way to connect with Haley in person if you're able to join us for that and learn from her in person. So we look forward to those opportunities. With that, we hope you subscribe to the podcast, share with others in your organization, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.